Recession indicators, they're starting to rise, guys. They're picking up. Is this another false signal, or is there actually something to be worried about? I've got that and more coming up. My name is Mike Bernard. I'm the host of the Wise Money Show. I'm also one of the certified financial planners right here at Korhorn Financial Group. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and smash that thumbs up button. When you hear those weather alerts, a warning coming through your cell phone, do you run to the basement? Or do you say, I'm sure it'll blow over. I'm sure it'll wake up. It's not a big deal. Well, regardless, right, when there's a warning about the economy, do you react? Should you react? Especially recently, we've had what seems like a long stretch of false signals about the economy that, stocks are valuations are getting stretched. Stocks are expensive. Watch out. We've had 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP. We're in a recession. Watch out. Lots of other things have signaled, even had the price of oil. It's never increased at this rate without causing a recession, and we weren't in one. So is this another false signal, or some of the new data points that are coming out sort of pointing to a recession? Is it possible that one is on the horizon? Well, let's take a look at a couple data points, and then we'll talk about whether there's any adjustments you should make. But the first one has to do with the yield curve reverting, not inverting, reverting. So in a normal functioning economy, the shorter term the loan, the lower the interest rate. The longer term the loan, the higher the interest rate. And that makes sense. If you were to loan someone money and say, give me the money back tomorrow, the risk is going to be pretty low, and therefore the interest rate should be pretty low. But if you say, here's some money, pay me back in 10 years, well, that risk is a little bit higher, right? That's real. And therefore the interest rate should be higher. Well, that's a normal functioning yield curve where short-term loans or short-term bonds are at a lower interest rate than longer-term bonds. And there's all sorts of metrics that sort of quantify this, but that is the yield curve, plotting the interest rate of short-term interest rates, short-term loans, intermediate-term loans, and long-term loans. That plotting of those interest rates, as long as they're moving up, the longer the length, the higher the interest rate, that's a normal functioning yield curve. Well, the yield curve gets inverted when all of a sudden short-term interest rates are higher than long-term interest rates. How in the world could this happen? Well, it tends to happen during anomalies in the economic cycle, specifically when the Fed, the Federal Reserve, is influencing short-term interest rates, which is what they have the propensity of doing, as part of a bigger picture monetary policy to manipulate the overall monetary policy in the direction of the economy. So they can control or influence short-term interest rates and drive interest rates up during times of high inflation. But if longer-term interest rates that are more influenced by the free market, if they say, we're not buying it. I know that you're trying to increase rates in the short term, but over the long term, things are going to even back out. You get this weird time period where short-term interest rates are actually higher than long-term interest rates. That's an inverted yield curve. Oftentimes that's cited, a yield curve inversion is cited as the most reliable recession indicator out there, because going back decades, now 50 years or so, we've seen a recession after every time this anomaly has occurred, this yield curve inversion. Well, take a look at this chart here. While that's true, if you look closer, it's actually not the timing of when the yield curve inverts that's so important to a recession, but actually the time when yield curves normalize or revert after an inversion. If you look closely here, those gray bars, those recessionary time periods, have really coincided much closer to when we've actually seen interest rates get back to normal, or the inversion goes back to reverting. And guys, that just happened just a few short weeks ago, where the 2-year interest rate, now there's lots of different points that you can plot on the yield curve, but specifically the 2-year interest rate compared to the 10-year interest rate. This is one of them that gets a lot of attention, one of these ratios that gets a lot of attention. The 2-year interest rate was higher than the 10-year interest rate for a long time, actually record time period, but it just ticked below just 2 weeks ago, the 2-year interest rate ticked barely below the 10-year, and the yield curve went from being inverted, or that part of the yield curve went from being inverted to now reverted. There's many people that are saying, see, now watch out, recession could be right on the horizon. Add on top of that, the challenges that we're seeing in some of the jobs numbers. You guys know that just a few weeks ago that the amount of jobs added over the previous 12 months was revised down over 800,000 jobs. That's not a rounding error. That's a systemic issue, and actually it's a head scratcher. There's some concern of some foul play there in the numbers, but that's an enormous revision down. And then just recently, you may have seen this chart that shows the number of layoffs reported in August, and just that's 1 month, sure, but the number of layoffs reported this August was the highest of any August outside of COVID, going back all the way to the great financial crisis. And when you add on to that the number of job openings and how that is continuing to decline at a very fast rate, you can see that the jobs market, or the jobs data, is starting to show a potential slowdown as well. And then finally, guys, 70% of the overall economy lies on the consumer. And so understanding the health of the average consumer is paramount to trying to anticipate where the economy is going. And there's more signs showing that the consumer is struggling and is under a lot of pressure, getting squeezed. One of those is credit card delinquencies have actually shot up. Now, we are not at a point that would say, or would be at the same level as previous recessions, but the rate of increase, the rate of change of how many new credit card delinquencies are on the horizon has absolutely skyrocketed and is very much on track with previous recessions. And then when you also look at personal savings rate, that is absolutely cratered. The leftover discretionary spending dollars that are available to someone after paying all their normal monthly bills, that number is well below long-term averages. Again, both of those data points showing that the consumer could be squeezed. So guys, new data showing recession could lie ahead, or at least some economic headwinds. What should you do? What should you do? Well, first, from a comprehensive financial planning standpoint, one, you need to make sure that you've got appropriate emergency fund in place, that you've got the appropriate financial backstop just in case these job losses or job cuts continues to spread. I mean, that's a staple with recessions. That's why a few years ago, when we had 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP, there were many people saying, we're not in a recession because the job market was so strong. Well, if that changes and we do see a recession, you're going to want to make sure that you've got the right financial backstop in place. So make sure that your emergency fund is fully funded. Check in on your own budget to ensure that there's appropriate margin and that you're also feeding your known upcoming expenses. That's your bucket number 2, your delayed spending. And then finally, make sure that you're not getting overextended with the amount of loans that you're taking on as well. Basically, borrowing tomorrow's money, future income, for expenses or lifestyle or purchases today. Make sure that when you look at your overall net worth, that the amount of debt that you have or your overall net worth is continuing to go in the right direction, and you're not taking on more financial risk. But then also, from an investment standpoint, you can't invest out of fear. You can't, it's not appropriate to be a long-term investor and constantly looking at your shadow or looking for the boogeyman. Do I need to change things because a recession could be coming? In order to be a successful investor, it doesn't require that you perfectly predict when a recession's coming and make a bunch of changes. No. One of the most important investment decisions that we all get to make is how much offense and how much defense. So hopefully your investment strategies that you've selected are the appropriate ones. If these are just more head fakes on the economy, or if we do actually see a recession, these strategies that you have in place are the ones to help you navigate and ride through it. So work with your certified financial planner on that. Make those checkpoints to make sure that you, in all 6 areas of your financial life, have the appropriate strategy should we see some rough economic climate ahead, as well as the right long-term investment strategies to ride you through that storm as well. Work with your CFP on that. If you don't have a CFP on your team, you can contact one on my team. Find us online, Korhorn.com. That's Korhorn with KWiseMoneyShow.com. You can find us there as well, or send us an email, info@Korhorn.com. All right, there you have it. Go out and take your next wise step in your financial life.